So this is what lawless Britain has come to. Quite obviously, Antifa spoiling for a fight, yet the police are just doing nothing whatsoever. Some are even fist pumping the anarchists in Antifa. Now they're putting their hands up, even though police officers don't have guns. What's the point in that? Quite clearly, it's just a symbolic, ridiculous attitude to take. I wonder how many of these so-called protesters / anarchists / students are privately educated with at least £5 million to their name. It's quite frankly ridiculous. They've taken one of the best cities in the world and reduced it to this.
From Whitehall, they were happy to leave them here while the protests were peaceful, but now these protests have turned violent and the police are moving in.
The police need to start doing their job properly. They need to start using some Margaret Thatcher police brutality, because this cannot go on as it is. The Antifa thugs just run in London. Sadiq Khan is not doing anything. Boris Johnson needs to take ownership of the city and get this sorted. And yet again, people putting their hands up, even though nobody's going to shoot them. The people more likely to shoot them are the actual anarchists next to them that do have guns and do have knives and regularly stab people. Beyond no doubt, this is photos and video of when an establishment has lost control of the situation. When they don't want to appear to be racist, even though the majority of the protesters / anarchists are white. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are genuine protesters out there for Black Lives Matter, and of course Black Lives do matter, but so do white lives, so do Asian lives, so do the other BAME community lives, so does every other person's life.
Despite the rain, the lightning, people have really changed their attitudes, although there do seem to be now some pictures we can show you. It looks like police with helmets on moving down towards Whitehall. A few of them, as the crowd continues to move round, it looks as though they're also moving with them, really keen to keep an eye on what they're going to do next, because as you know, with crowds like this, it's difficult to know their next move.
Ashna, thank you very much. I want to bring Graham Wetton, our policing analyst, back in. Graham, it's interesting, whilst we're showing these pictures, we've got cameras in a few locations in the area. You can see a lot of people with mobile phones right in the faces of police officers, and the eyes of the world in this social media era are very much on what is happening with these protests. And the police have to be very mindful of that this is the public that is, quite frankly, distrustful of the police at the moment.
I think it's only a small element, a small minority that is distrustful. As you can see on the pictures now, all the officers have got body-worn video on anyway, so they're very well used to having these camera phones now almost like pushed into their face and everybody recording. You saw numerous people recording the police action, so they know they're being watched. They know that the news cameras are there as well. It's part of the briefing. They're told about it. They're almost expected now on these events. So, but they're being thoroughly professional. They know about this anyway. So, as I've said before, they're just trying to restore order now, try and maintain some peace to the area, keep the cordons in place, speak to the people, try and calm things down, restore it back to what it was before, which was a peaceful protest. It's escalated. It seems by people throwing some bottles and things at the officers outside Downing Street. So the command team have deployed properly kitted up officers. But you can see some of the officers on the cordons now have got their NATO helmets on their belt, so they can quickly change into their protective kit. But there's obviously a willingness, a desire by the command team to put almost like a normality back into this. So we get the officers back out in their normal headgear, which isn't protected, try and restore almost like a normal policing picture to what we're seeing. That's just outside, I think that's Bridge Street, just outside, I think that's St Stephen's pub, just on the right-hand side there. So Parliament on the left-hand side, Parliament Square in front of you. So you can see the command team clearly putting cordons in place, trying to keep the people where they are at the moment and just try and talk to them and calm things down again.
Graham, Met Police really wanted this to be a low-key policing event, didn't they? Will they have considered the fact that things have kicked off a little bit, certainly outside Downing Street on Whitehall? Will they consider that a failure? Will they consider that probably inevitable, given the mood of many of these protesters?
I don't think I should consider it a failure of the policing operation. I think that's been fine so far. You have to react to what the crowd do. If the crowd decide to start throwing things at your offices, and you've got to react to that. I thought they were slow to react on Wednesday. I've said that on social media. But actually, they reacted very quickly this time. They got officers with their protective kit. They've replaced the officers that were in Downing Street that were coming under fire from bottles and other implements. So I don't think they'll see it as a failure of the policing operation. It's probably a failure of the actual protest. This was again billed as a peaceful protest. Come along and peacefully protest about the whole aspect of what's been going on and everybody's getting angry about. That happened in America. For me now, this is going beyond protest. This is coming into disorder and violence on the streets of London, and it's good to see the police reacting to it. But again, doing it professionally, trying to calm things down now.
Just an interesting point to make, given the fact that this is a protest taking place in the middle of a global pandemic, and we know how easily this virus can spread. Can you tell us why police officers aren't wearing face masks?
I can only presume it's because there isn't enough of them to go around, or it's not standard regulations, to my knowledge, at the moment, for the officers to have every officer to be deployed with a face mask on. I've got no other knowledge on it other than that. Either they haven't got enough to go around to give it to every officer deployed in the event, or they just haven't had time to do it. I'm not overly sure on why they haven't all got it, but clearly you can see from the pictures that hardly any of them have got them on. Plus the fact it would interfere to a certain extent in when you put your NATO helmet on and then being able to communicate with each other. Communication is a key part of policing, being able to speak to the unit under your command, from the supervisors especially, but also for the officers in communicating with the public.
I mean, it's interesting, as you say, you feel that in many ways this has moved from a protest to a disorder and a violent situation, and dangerous not just for the protesters but for the police officers as well, when missiles are being thrown and horses are bolting up Whitehall. But also dangerous, as you say, if they are either not able to get hold of PPE or choosing not to because it stops them from being able to police effectively during something like this. It's kind of like a double whammy for officers, isn't it?
To a certain extent it is, but as I keep saying, from what I'm seeing on the pictures here, they've reacted very professionally, very swiftly to quell the disorder, the violence that started in a number of outside Downing Street, and now these pictures from Bridge Street, as I said, just by Houses of Parliament. So try and keep the whole area calm. Put the cordons in place, put a number of officers out there. There are probably even more resources being either briefed or warned to come down and assist in then clearing the area if they need to. But the concern will be is where you're going to clear them to. So they'll try and actually manage any dispersal and do it very, very slowly, very methodically, but in a controlled manner.
And Graham, listen, you spent decades in the police force. You've got oodles of contacts still there. What is the mood amongst people that you've been speaking to in terms of response, or perhaps even frustration, that something that's happened many, many miles away from police officers who clearly act violently, very different from the officers that we're seeing here on the streets of London, that frustration's being turned at them, that there's been violence towards British officers for the actions of American officers? Is there some frustration about that?
I think there's an element of frustration. I think there's also they understand the anger. The police in America deal with people very, very differently than we do here. So police officers understand the anger. I can't comment on the actual case itself, but having looked at it, I can understand why people are angry. I can understand why there's a lack of trust, but it's for the officers that were involved in that incident, not for these officers we're seeing on the screen. We don't police the same way over here. We don't police either members of the public or protests like this the same way they do in America. So there's an element of frustration by police officers. Actually, they're almost like getting the brunt of people's anger about something that happened some distance away in a different country on a different continent. And they're now facing the anger and resentment from people that seems to be or is been initiated by an action they have no control over whatsoever.
OK, Graham, thanks very much for your analysis. Let's cross to our correspondent, Ashna Hurinag, who's outside the Foreign Office for us this evening. Ashna, I'm hoping to get your pictures as well in just a moment. Just bring us up to date on things where you are.
I'm not sure if you...
Yes, Ashna, I don't know if you can hear us. We're just hoping to check in with you outside the Foreign Office.
Yeah, I do apologise. I do apologise if you can hear any profanity. These are live shots we're bringing you now. We're outside the Foreign Office. And as you can see, the crowd here incredibly antagonised to see cameras here, any form of media. What you saw a few moments ago, or there would be all these crowd were antagonising a lot of the police that are outside the Foreign Office. Many of them wearing, all of them in fact, wearing riot gear, riot shields, helmets, and they're all currently, the camera is currently not on them, but if I turn around and just give you an idea of what they are seeing is very much a lot of them are keeping an eye on cameras, they're keeping an eye on the media. There has been an incredibly volatile relationship with the media, but we are walking away from them purely for our safety. But many of them still gathering around the police by the Foreign Office, antagonising them. There's lots of graffiti written on the Foreign Office wall. And you know what? This is such a shame because ultimately it is the message that's being destroyed here. But there is a lot of people, and I have to say it's absolutely extraordinary to see London like this. The rain hasn't put them off clearly, but there is definitely an energy about this, negative energy. And if ultimately their message is to stop social injustice, people will question, is this the way to do it? Antagonising the police, shouting in their faces. And when we try and film it, it's difficult for us to be accepted in that way. But further down, as you can see, that's Whitehall, full of people. You can see the blockades from the police vans, but very much police on edge. They're clearly trained for scenarios like this, but when people are shouting in their faces, it's difficult to keep their cool.
OK, Ashna, thanks very much indeed. Let's cross back to Mark White, who's been right at the heart of much of the violence this evening. Mark, just bring us up to date on things where you are.
Yeah, it's a lot calmer here now. We're getting some musical numbers played for the crowd that has them dancing around, Where's the Love in it, and a few songs like that. So it's certainly a welcome interlude. And that's concentrated mind, so they've taken away their attention for a while at least from the police officers who are still there in that line across Whitehall, determined to stop these protesters getting any further up towards Downing Street. So thankfully at the moment, as I say, the atmosphere is lifted a little bit. I wouldn't describe it as anything other than still tense. But the crowd's not concentrating their ire on the police just now, at least just chatting amongst themselves and just dancing away. Very different to what it was just a while ago.